a little bit about myself. I'm sorry, I forgot to click the slide. Actually, not allowing me to. 1 second, there's a little delay with my slide. Well, to tell you a little bit about myself while we're figuring that out. I am originally from Detroit, Michigan. I was a youth involvement coordinator for about 10 years here in Wayne County, and the director of Youth M.O.V.E. Michigan. I have supervised about 14 youth and young adults between ages 16 and 25. Well, in total over my career, probably more along the lines of 80 youth and young adults. And we have 2 additional co-presenters today, and I'm going to give them a chance to introduce themselves.
Thank you so much, Jasmine. My name is Madeline Zielinski. I'm also with Youth M.O.V.E. National. I work as a youth program specialist in our member services department. Calling you today from Indiana, where I spent 3 years as the state coordinator for Youth M.O.V.E., which was a system of care grant. I'm very excited to be here with you all today to talk about what it's like to transition from being an advocate to being a supportive adult in the field.
And hello, my name is Joshua Calorino. I'm the currently the board president for Youth National. Before that, I was actually the vice president of a more local chapter called Youth M.O.V.E. I actually serve as a consultant for SAMHSA, and I also have served as a member of the God Transitions Youth Advisory Board. I currently also work as the training coordinator for a little organization called South Florida Wellness Network in South Florida. And before that, I was the lead peer at the Federation of Families Miami-Dade chapter. And like Madeline, I'm very happy to be here to present to you all today.
Great. Thank you so much, Joshua, for joining us today to help present. So now we'd love to hear from you all. It's always great to know who's in the audience. So please feel free to use the chat box over here on your Adobe to let us know what's your name, location, and title. And then please describe a learning goal that you have in your current role. So in your role that you have right now, what's something that, that you are working to improve or to learn? We'll go ahead and let people introduce themselves in the chat box and read some of those aloud. Okay, it looks like people are typing in the chat box. Thank you guys so much. We'll be reading those out as they come in. As we wait for those to come in, I can tell you a little bit about who we are at Youth M.O.V.E. National. We are all part of the Youth M.O.V.E. National team, which is a youth-driven, chapter-based organization. And what we do is we take the voices of young adults who have lived experience in mental health and addiction recovery and help to bring those voices to program and policy development. So let's see who's in the audience with us today. We have Randy from South Bend, Indiana, who is a team leader for transition-aged youth services. Thanks for joining us, Randy. We also have Rachel Labrie, who is from Worcester, Massachusetts. They're a youth advocate specialist at Youth M.O.V.E. Mass and a project consultant with Youth M.O.V.E. National. They say, I want to learn more about fostering leadership in the youth and young adults in my local chapter. Awesome. Thank you for joining us. We also have Amanda Hirsch from Pittsburgh, who is a youth support partner. They say that thinking about additional career ideas for youth support providers. Absolutely. We're definitely going to talk about transition and what that's like for some of those youth providers. Thanks for joining us. We have Kate and Stephanie from Kentucky Youth M.O.V.E. Thanks for joining us. We also have Azaria with the NYS Peer Advocate Credentialing. I am creating a training in credentialing, and my goal is to provide a training that can support not only
All guests
YPAs,
have been muted.
but the young people they serve. Wonderful.
Mute off.
Everyone for joining us. Please feel free to keep introducing yourself in the chat box. Check out who's here. Some of your peers. We'll be keeping an eye on those. So a little bit about Direct Connect. If you haven't been with us in a while, just to let you know, this is a learning opportunity in a virtual forum, and it's really just to help bring some professional skills and current knowledge to the community, as well as connect with the community, to get to know who's out there, who's doing the same work as you in different places, and to share new resources so that we can have professional peers across the country connecting with each other and improving services.
Okay, our learning objective for today is to define and understand how to work within these advocate transition stages. It is 7 stages, and we'll go more into detail later in the slides. Identify the need for professional career pathways for youth and young adults with lived experience, and we'll also outline a few. Access specific next steps to grow the career pathway in your own community. Sorry.
Great. So today we're going to be talking about what it's like to transition from being a youth advocate, someone who's out there telling their story, to being an advocate for youth, somebody who is supporting other young adults in telling their story. So it's really about transition and what that looks like through the natural flow of working within systems. This was put together with the support of SAMHSA by Youth M.O.V.E, as well as Pathways. So transitions keep happening as we go through the system, whether we're working as advocates or just receiving support. It's important to be able to identify what happens, and we have this wonderful quote here that says, "Change happens, and it happens to everyone. Transition, on the other hand, is the process that happens in your head, heart, and gut as you adjust to become familiar with change." So before we get started, these are some terms that we're going to use, and just real quickly, I'm going to go over some that might be unfamiliar. So youth advocate is one that we're going to use a lot, and I'm sure that most of you have heard. And when we say youth advocate, what we mean is a young person, usually 15 to 25, who has that lived experience and is telling their story to create system change. There's also advocate for youth, and these sound really similar, but they're actually different. So an advocate for youth is someone who is older than the youth advocate, so they're maybe 25 to 35. You've aged out of actually being that young adult, and you've transitioned to advocating for those youth. So you're still doing work in the system, you're still sharing your personal experience, but your focus is on creating change and opportunities for other young adults within the system. So there's a little bit of a difference there. One is the young adult that's advocating, and the other is someone who has that experience but is working to create space for more young adults. There's also supportive adult, which is something that Jasmine is going to walk us through a little bit later. And this is an ally who supports young adults in creating that system change. So there is a space for adults in the youth movement, and we usually use the term supportive adult. Lived experience, this is pretty much what it sounds like, having gone through the system, whether it's mental health, child welfare, juvenile justice, et cetera, and having that experience. So then youth voice, this is the engagement and representation, and then Generation Next is a concept is the idea that this is something that we need to sustain any youth movement is being able to help young adults transition, because it's just part of the field is that youth grow up, right? So those are just some definitions that are going to help guide us through today. I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Joshua. He's going to walk us through the first few stages. I'll take back over, and then Jasmine will close us out with talking about transitioning into a supportive adult. So with that, Joshua, I'll go ahead and pass it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So I just want to know that I just wanted to sort of go over a little bit on the stage one here. So the first stage is knowing, owning, and sharing of your story. And to do that, you have to develop ownership over your lived experiences and your life story. So you have to sit down and you have to really take time with a youth or with yourself, whatever direction that's coming from, and really get down to what your story is. Make an elevator speech of the points that you want to nail down without providing too much context and maybe bleeding a little bit into having secondary traumas happening. So you want to sit down, own your story, be comfortable with sharing it, be comfortable with yourself in it and things like that. And then you want to successfully develop the use of self-advocacy skills to promote your own wellness. So again, in sharing your story, it can be very, very difficult to do so. You're essentially reliving your trauma, going through this process, and it can be taxing to one. So being able to sit down and develop your self-advocacy skills that will allow you to keep away from that while also promoting your own wellness. So you can sit down and really be able to share with things like that. And you can share those things to be able to promote your own wellness. You can go into meetings and you can sit down and you can really speak for yourself so that and have no one speak for you. The nothing about us without us mentality. Being able to develop self-advocacy skills and be in the room for these things can really, really be useful. And in this stage, once you sit down and you develop your own story, and you use these skills, it starts to roll over. It starts to you can start to begin to support other youth that are not just yourself anymore, and that sort of leads a little bit into the future stages. I am currently having some trouble moving the slides. Can someone move them down a little bit for me? Thank you. And it's very, very essential to have supportive adults. I know that it can be difficult to garner this kind of things, but when having a supportive adult, I know that with myself, I had people like Janet, and I had people like Rocio, these people who maybe were not in the youth movement and maybe didn't even understand the youth movement, but they still gave me the space and supported me through my process and my journey of recovery and through my journey of self-advocacy as well. They maybe didn't fully understand it, but they just gave me that space. They allowed me, and if I ever had any questions, I was able to reach out to them to be able to go ahead and use these things that I've learned throughout my time. Receive the strategic sharing and trauma-informed training. Again, having supportive adults and having these mentors, I was very much able to take trainings. I was able to take trainings like mental health first aid, able to take trainings like RAP, trauma-informed care, wellness recovery action planning, a wraparound. All of those things I was given the space to do, and I had the ability to take in any time when I thought that it was needed. And they shared that with me. That was given to me, and I always took the initiative and the gumption to be able to move along and do those things. And then identifying what parts of the story are that you are comfortable in sharing, or that your youth is comfortable in sharing, and which part may need a little bit of extra development. Remember, in crafting your story, we have an end goal. We want to make change either for ourselves or for others, and you need to be comfortable in doing so. Some parts of the story, as I mentioned earlier, they can be very, very uncomfortable. They can be traumatic. They can really be difficult to just get through, not only for yourself, but maybe even for others to listen to. So being able to be comfortable with that, being able to sit down and really think about this story and how to develop it so that when you say it, people understand where you're coming from and what it is you want to do with it and what changes even can be made to help make it so that other people in the future don't share the same story that you're sharing now. I believe that we have some resources coming up. We have the strategic sharing guide, trauma informed care, stuff like that. We can drop that into the chat box for our participants. And with that, we move onto stage 2. This is beyond your personal advocacy. So now we've sat down, we've flexed our advocacy skills, we've maybe made changes in our own daily lives in the services that we're receiving, but now we're moving past that, right? Now we're moving into sort of advocating for others, or advocating for entire systems to be changed, entire counties, entire grants, things like this. So what you need to start getting into this is to practice your expertise and strategically sharing your story in public with the intention of promoting said changes, right? So in my experience, I was given the room to facilitate specific meetings. My mentors sat beside me during these meetings to help maybe guide me if I got lost while sharing my story, if I got lost in these things. They sort of were there to guide me. And having that space to be able to practice and to be able to have that experience would then flow into allowing me to be able to take these things, and do them myself entirely. So I'm able to sit down, I'm able to not only share my story, but share how my story reflects along this entire system, what my story was along the entire system, and how that system either did me wrong or the changes that I did to make the system promote more positive changes and have more positive outcomes in the end goal. And when doing that, it is important to get specific on the topics where your life story is most effective. It's about being intentional. So don't just give random ideas and random topics of things that happen. When you do that, really explain what it was like. And think about, what is my main message? What message am I portraying? Am I portraying the topic of recovery? Am I portraying the topic of being in therapy, of having a peer? Right? Where is your story going? What is the main message? Do you want better outcomes? Things like these questions are the questions that you want to ask yourself. And who would be most likely to change for your story? Think of your audience. Is your audience other people who are receiving services? Are they the grant runners, the project directors? Who are these going to? Who have the ability to make the changes that you want to see? And where do you share your story? Again, you can't just go into any random room and start sharing your story. You need to be intentional of where you go. So are you going to go to your advisory meetings? Are you going to be going to just your general meetings where you just speak to your support groups? Things like that. These are the questions that you should be asking yourself when going through this. And that brings us to step 3, using your experience personally or professionally. So now, instead of still working a little bit on oneself, you've now moved into working for the entire youth movement now. You've taken it away from yourself and you're really trying to shift across the country the story of recovery and advocacy. So it's fully shifted. And now you also bring in your statistics, your policies, best practice, and your collective stories. So by now you're comfortable. You've shared your story. You've even helped maybe change a system of care grant in your local community. But now we're thinking bigger. And now we can not only share our story anecdotally, but have numbers to coincide with those stories. This is where you want to be working with evaluation teams. Your evaluation team of a community, or you could find stuff online from universities of best practices and policies and collective stories. And all of the things like that you can really embed and tie in with not only your story, but all the stories you've collected from hearing from others. Remember, it's no longer about just you and your self-advocacy. You're now affecting the entire movement as a whole. And in sharing your story and affecting these things, you can do that in many different ways. It's not necessarily always just standing in front of a podium at a large conference and being this advocate and sharing your story. You could do it as a mentor. You could do it as an advisor, as a peer supporter, as a peer evaluator. There's different contexts that these things can work in. So it's important to use these contexts where you see fit. Experience more formal roles in story sharing and advocacy. Youth may start to receive compensation for time, if not already. Remember, these youth, they're going out of their way to do these things. There's a large time commitment. They have to prepare for these things. So it's important to add a formality in that. Try and compensate them, whether that's through a stipend, an honorarium, maybe just paying for just their travel time and things like that. Provide something for them. Remember, they're now developing not just for their own recovery, but they're really putting in work to be able to do these things. So it's important to compensate them for that however you can and however you see fit. Remember, the skills developed during this particular phase, where now you're speaking in front of groups and you're changing, these things cannot be transferred into all other careers, whether that be computer science, into health services, networking, professionalism. These are more of these soft skills where you're developing your networking skills and your ability to speak to others, your interpersonal skills. So being able to think about not just in the context of you changing these movements, but that how can I use this to be able to change in other movements or be able to fix other areas that I deem as not up to the current proper standard. And then you should be having reflection questions to this stage. A lot of times you get caught up and they start to say yes to everything to try and get more and do more and change more, but that starts to run into where you start to run into burnout and things like that. So the idea of saying, when do I say no, or if you're an advocate for youth, telling them maybe you should say no to this, maybe this isn't the proper time for you to be doing this. And again, is also thinking this job is very difficult and every youth has their own future. Do you want to do that as a career? How far do you want to take this? How much do you want to do in this line of work? These questions are very important to be asking yourselves. And again, we have another list of resources that we can drop into the chat box as well. And with that, I will go ahead and give it away to the next presenter.
Thank you so much, Joshua. It's so awesome to have your lived experience. So I'm going to keep tapping into Joshua and Jasmine as we go through some of these other stages. So Joshua has just sort of walked us through what's it like to become an advocate and what it's like to support other people as you're becoming an advocate. So, so this sort of brings us into a little bit deeper into the work. Now you're in the field, maybe you're receiving compensation, maybe you have a formal role. So what does this look like and what does this mean for you now that you've built a career off of basically, you know, being willing to open yourself up and share about what's generally a pretty traumatic thing. So what does this mean for us as people? So the stage 4 sort of is focusing on maintaining personal identity. There can be some struggles with self-identity when you're telling these stories. There is, when you're working in a bureaucratic setting and when you're working in a place where, you know, we haven't totally made it through breaking down those stigma barriers, there can be external pressure when you're telling your story about what people expect or feeling that you are identified only with your story or there's things that maybe you shouldn't share versus staying true to yourself. So this sort of leaves you asking, you know, what is my role in system change? You know, we are more than our story. And so what does this look like for me as I'm continuing on through this advocacy away from being a youth advocate? So each of these steps is really about stepping more away from telling your personal story and towards advocating for other youth populations. So, so this is a part where we're working to stay true to the why of our work. What am I going to do in the work? We can start to use the tools that we've gathered, these leadership tools, and even just the day-to-day operations of an office to find a role within the system. So that sort of brings us to stage 5, which is experience never leaves. So you've transitioned, you're no longer telling your story. What you're doing is making room for other young adults. Maybe you're coordinating, maybe you're being a peer support, This is the breakaway point. So this lived experience does stay with us, and if you're someone that's working in the field that has lived experience, you understand how validating it can be and how helpful it can be to be able to relate to the people that you're working with. So it's important here to look at what your experiences have taught you so far about where you can make the most effective change within the system. So say there's a certain part of your work that you really relate to, that maybe you're a really excellent speaker or trainer, or maybe you have excellent writing skills, and you can look into see what can I do with these skills, how can they aid me in transitioning to support other young adults. And remember to keep in mind, this sort of has to go back to stage 4 as well, is that we are more than our story. So what does this mean about our identity? We have some resources here for you all. We will be able to get a copy of this for everyone. I see some people are asking in the chat box. This presentation is also being recorded and will be available on the TA Network's YouTube channel. We're going to go ahead and drop these resources in the box for you. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to Jasmine, who can take us here to stage 6, which is the arrival of the advocate for youth.
Thank you, Natalie. Next slide, please. Let me see if I can move it. Okay, I wasn't able to move the slide. If one of my co-presenters could help me move to stage 6, that would be great. So in stage 6, pretty much you are asking why things are kind of operating the way they do, and each role, each entity play within that. So maybe what are the needs of the adults, what are the needs of youth-run organizations, and really starting to look at what are the needs of youth advocates. At this stage, having someone to bounce ideas off of and who knows more than you can, or who knows a little more than you and can kind of show you the ropes is essential. Now, continuous mentorship and support is a little easier said than done, depending on the workload of the identified mentor or support, and we recognize that. So in my community, we put together a kind of informal structure of shared mentorship and support. What that looked like for our advocates were we identified what were the needs for youth and young adults within our community, within Wayne County. So what system meetings did we need to attend? What activities did we need to participate in? And then we identified strong adult allies connected to each one of those meetings and activities that were willing to help and support us with learning what we needed to know to be successful in those meetings and being as active and as involved as possible. Even down to helping with transportation, because we all know that young people have issues with transportation. So pairing young people up with adult champions within the community actually gave them time to do more preparation for the meetings, debriefing of the meetings, and then bonding and learning more about each other. So in this stage, you're probably still questioning and trying to figure out which role now, which way to go. And some people stay within mental health or stay within youth work. Some others branch off and maybe become case managers or do something in other fields. In this stage, it's really important to again, think back to the Generation Next concept, which is in order to sustain any youth movement as a youth advocate transition from a youth advocate to an advocate for youth, it is essential that there is continuous engagement of the next generation. And then the key concepts that we're talking about are shared events and experiences, mentorship, leadership development, and modeling. Pretty much it's important for us to really pave the way for younger and youth to really get into those leadership roles and step into the places as we are moving forward in our path. Next slide, please.
If I could actually interject for just one moment on that, Jasmine. With Generation Next, I think it's important that oftentimes what happens is that you may have a peer who works in a certain community as a youth coordinator or what have you, and then at some point that peer will just decide to move on, and there won't ever be a replacement for that person. And they sort of leave this big void in there that just has to be immediately filled, and somebody who has to essentially start from scratch gets put into that place, and they have to make it work. Whereas if you were to have a sort of system where maybe that youth peer sits down with the young adults and youth who are in a certain organization and sort of build them up, it's very likely that that one of those youth or one of those young adults can then go ahead and move in to fill that gap. So there's less of a recuperation time where you start from zero again, whereas any of the knowledge that is gets instilled from the youth coordinator before they leave will be with one of the youth who are already receiving services at your organization. Thank you. Sorry for interjecting.
No problem. Thanks, Josh. The next thing we have is a resource that really helps identify some good tips on, who pretty much is a guide for youth engagement, and it is through the National Resource Center for Youth Development. Next slide, please. So becoming supportive adults. This is the fun part. So this is the part where you have actually transitioned completely from a youth advocate to an advocate for youth. And this is when you are now offering yourself as a resource to other young people and supporting them as needed, but knowing when to respect their space and giving them time to do it on their own. When you give them space to kind of do things on their own, it encourages the youth to do research, to ask questions, to do more peer-to-peer learning, to maybe talk to individuals that they maybe wouldn't have talked to any other time. It teaches youth how to handle issues. Maintaining confidentiality and respect is a big thing, and one of the key things that you probably need to figure out what you're going to do when you are bringing young people on as leaders. We know that a lot of times there are parent organizations and youth organizations sometimes operating under the same roof, or sometimes we have parents working with young people and their parents working with them in the same workplace. That's what I'm saying. Sorry about that. And sometimes it's hard to know when you should disclose information about a young person to their parents, especially a young person who technically has a job within your organization. And so one of the things that we did here locally in my community was, in order to kind of know when to treat a young person as this is their job and to hold them accountable and to not always, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought there. But we created a crisis plan. We created a professional development plan just to make sure that our young people knew that, well, we knew as administrators that if our young people were in crisis, it was okay for us to reach out to their parents. It was okay to reach out to whoever they had identified as their emergency contact. However, if it wasn't something that fell into a crisis, that we treated it as a professional development opportunity, and that was something that we would not involve their parents, even if their parents was an adult support or a parent partner, we would not involve their parents in that. Next slide, please. Sorry about this, you guys. I'm actually presenting blind. My screen keeps freezing. And so the next slide we have is a resource slide. And this is really around tips to establish lifelong relationships with young people. So the next slide we have, we pretty much want to know from you all, what stage do you feel like you most identify with? Is it the knowing, owning, and sharing your own story stage? Is it beyond your personal advocacy, being a resource for change stage? Is it using experience personally or professionally, which is stage 3? Is it stage 4, which is maintaining personal identity? Is it stage 5, experience never leaves? Is it stage 6, arrival of an advocate for youth? Or is it stage 7, becoming a supportive adult? If you could go ahead and leave your answers in the chat box.
So I'm looking at the chat box here. We have Rachel and Imari both saying they identify with stage 3. I also feel like I identify with stage 3. But another stage 3. Madeline feeling like she's a stage 6. Thanks for sharing, Maddie.
Okay, do we have any other responses in the chat box?
Got a few 3s, a couple 6s. So that's awesome. It sounds like there's a lot of people here that are starting to move towards using their experience professionally, as well as actually becoming an advocate for youth. What's also awesome about this is that as someone who is transitioning, if you are someone who's identifying as a 6 or as a 7, you can use your experience to help other young adults who maybe are in the earlier stages, the 1s, 2s, and 3s, to be aware of what it's like to transition so that they can have a little more knowledge going into what that transition is like. So we do have some resources here. If you're looking at your screen, you can see that we have some Youth Advocate to Advocate for Youth guides. There is a worksheet here. It sort of identifies or helps people to walk through what stage am I in, what resources do I have, what skills do I want to develop, just some thought work for a group. So we did this in Indiana when I was the state coordinator there, and basically just got our small group of young adults together and sat around and went through this. This is actually a handout that you're looking at. It's a multiple page sort of booklet that you can print out. You can also, I believe you can order these from SAMHSA if you go to the SAMHSA store. If you have a SAMHSA grant, then you can get them for free. I think if you don't, there's like a very small fee. But those are all available to you. They're also available online. You can print them out. And we just basically went around in a circle and took turns talking about the stages and what it was like and how we related to them. And it really helped some of those young adults see what's going to happen when I age out of the organization and of the program, because that's a really big problem that a lot of these groups have, is this fear of, okay, well, I'm getting older, but I have all these great skills, and I just feel like now that I'm finally getting the hang of it, suddenly I'm not a youth advocate anymore. So what does that mean? I don't, and we don't want that knowledge to just walk out the door. We want to help to keep the youth movement going and promote advocacy. So this is a great way to show people, like, hey, just because you turn 27 doesn't mean that you have to leave the program. This also helps with sustainability because it brings those supportive adults back in, and supportive adults who know the program already. So you're not starting from scratch. So you can find these resources very easily. If you go to youthmovenational.org, you can see here, we just redid our website. It looks beautiful. Shout out to Michael. If you click at the top tab that says resources, it'll bring you there. And then you'll see some options at the bottom. There's lots of great resources, but to find this one, you'll click Generation Next, and it'll bring up those worksheets that we just demonstrated. And thank you very much. We've dropped that link in the box for you. In the chat box, you can click youthmovenational.org, go to Resources, Generation Next, and you'll find all those available for you. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it back over to Jasmine. Oh, wait, no, Jasmine, you want me to do this part?
This is Joshua.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so I'll hand it over to Joshua. He is going to help us walk through this this transition from youth professional to advocate for youth.
Alrighty, so for this part, what we're going to talk about is we're going to go through an example of current career pathways that youth members may experience. So in the first example here, right, so remember, you were also focusing on the stages in this process as well. So keep the stages in mind as I go through this. So we're starting off, you're just the youth receiving services. Maybe you have mental health, substance abuse, maybe co-occurring, whatever that is. You're just currently receiving services. You're going through stage one, trying to understand your story, and you maybe want to try and advocate for yourself. But as you do that, you've gotten comfortable with your story, and you feel good, and you've advocated for yourself. You've moved up now. Now you're a youth advocate on the System of Care Governance Board. So now you've moved maybe into stage 2, possibly stage 3, and you're trying to change the system of care for a certain grant or a certain community. And say you get the gumption, you get the feeling that you want to move up, and you maybe want to do this as a line of work. So you become a youth recovery coach. You're doing your job, you're working, experiencing, you're using the story professionally and personally, right? Then again, you can then move up. You become a youth peer supporter at a mental health system of care, for example. And then once more, you move up as a youth peer supervisor. You've used your story, you've strategized, you've got it connected, and being able to do each of these steps has led you all the way up to becoming a youth supervisor. It seems, oh, I apologize. I just lost connection to the server. I am back. Okay. On example 2, this is an example where maybe it doesn't follow this exact path of wanting or having received services or even wanting to do the work, right? So this particular example is actually modeled after myself, Joshua Calorino. So I started off as a Youth M.O.V.E group member. I was just a random person sort of off the street, and then just came to my local Youth M.O.V.E chapter. I was not in the youth movement. I hadn't really understood the whole process, things like that. But through exposure, I started to understand what was really going on. So I started to share my own story, advocate, learn to facilitate. During my time, I was experiencing a lot of the steps simultaneously. I would sit down in my first couple months there at the subcommittee and evaluation subcommittee meetings and really try to understand everything that was going on. Then through my time being there, I was elected as an officer in the position of the Youth M.O.V.E chapter. I was elected as the vice president of Youth M.O.V.E Miami. And during that time, again, all these stages coming at me at once. I'm learning to be comfortable with my own story, advocate for other people, advocate for myself, sort of really just finding myself, and it was all coming at me simultaneously, and it was very difficult. But like I said, I had some supportive adults who were able to keep me grounded. I had a mentor who was a youth advocate herself to also keep me grounded. And then again, now simultaneously, I've done all these things. I've learned a lot. I'm still working through it, but it doesn't have to just be that it's a linear path. I was also working as a youth voice consultant. I would go out and speak in front of, and as a facilitator for other organizations, or I would speak as a keynote or do things like that. And then again, moving up on my time, I decided to become an elected officer position with Youth M.O.V.E. National. I actually ended up, as you guys know now, becoming the president, but I'm running all these things simultaneously. During my time of getting elected as an officer with Youth M.O.V.E. National, I decided to take the Florida Certification Board's test to become a certified peer. So now I'm working with Youth M.O.V.E. National as an elected officer. I'm also working currently at the Federation of Families as the lead peer and also being certified as well. Then I moved up. I spent some time working as a peer evaluator for a managing entity down in Broward County in Florida. And then after that, we moved to my current job as a training coordinator for South Florida Wellness Network. So my path wasn't exactly that I wanted to be in services. It wasn't exactly that I wanted to do all of these things, but I still went through it using the same similar stages and still am a youth advocate just, through and through, just as anyone else is. So now we're going to move down to example one, and we're really going to expand on this, right? So again, example one, we're sitting down, we're youth who's receiving services and maybe who wants to work in this field. So again, we're still receiving services, we move up. We're a youth advocate on the System of Care Governance Board, but instead of following the linear path of becoming a recovery coach and then all the way up to becoming a supervisor, there's many different pathways that branch out from this. You have to recall that a lot of the skills that are discovered through the 7 stages don't just apply just to sharing your story and to making change. You can take these to other professions, to other places. So maybe you want to be another professional in a helping role. Maybe you do want to be an evaluator, or maybe you do want to be a trainer for youth recovery coaches or a master youth recovery coach or things like that. These things can branch out. And with that, say you're trying to hire youth, you can see how in this realm, that having just one youth hired or one youth funded position can be very difficult because there's a lot of roles to fill, as you can see in this example. And then that also is very limiting. It can be very difficult to be a one-man show trying to run a youth program, which is why it's important to branch out and have multiple people, to have multiple youth advocates and supporters and all that to bounce off of to really help grow a specific community. And then moving down now to example 2, right? Again, it's not been expanded. I can become a youth consultant. I could become the lead researcher and evaluator. I could become a training coordinator, or I could just become a youth coordinator and have a program position in these regional. So as you can see, there's a lot of flexibility within all of these. Life can be very tumultuous, very difficult, and they can move in a lot of ways. So it's important to remember that these skills can be transferred into a ton of different places and nothing is set in stone. You don't have to do it as a profession. You could just do it to advocate like I do, and you could also have as a profession like I also do. You could have one or the other or both. These things are very possible, so it's important to look at all the possibilities while you're moving through each stage. And keep that question in your mind of, do I want to do this as a career, or how do I want to do this, and who do I want to do this for? So moving on to the next slide here, the why do we need pathways. So youth are continually looking for the next opportunity. This is, again, to keep youth engaged, you wanna have them have buy-in. You wanna have them be able to do things. Don't just have them there in the room to be tokenized, but have them do something. This is the Nothing About Us Without Us movement. The youth want things to do, and youth are very, very capable of doing them, really. Not all the youth that you have just want a job. Some youth, they'll just want to make a difference, or they'll want to be a voice for other supporters within their communities, or they want to make change. It's not necessarily just for the money or just to be stable. They really do want to contribute something to make some kind of system better. people are more likely to stay in a position that has an opportunity for advancement. So again, like the tree that we just went over, it started just as a member and moved all the way up to being a peer supervisor, or for me, it started off as just being a regular member at a Youth M.O.V.E. chapter, all the way up to being the board president of the national organization. They want to be able to have this thing to look forward to. And as youth, we want to move forward. We want to be able to grow. We're growing ourselves. We could be in college. We could be just starting our first job, all of these things. So being able to have something to look forward to, an opportunity for advancement, can be very, very invaluable. And again, that keeps that buy-in and keeps youth wanting to stay at your organization to continue to grow and do more. Pathways provide hope and empowerment for a stronger future. Again, this is an entire movement, and providing a pathway for advancement or providing these kinds of services that are all-encompassing can really provide a stronger future, not only for just one youth, but for all youth in your community, all youth in your state, all youth in your country. Youth with lived experience are valuable in many roles. As we went over before, they could be an evaluator, they can be a peer evaluator, someone who can really dig deep with these youth and really get a lot of extra information that you otherwise would not be able to get to. They could be leaders within your communities. They can be there at the governor's office and the mayor's office advocating for these things. Or they could be very, very impassioned, hardworking members of your staff and things like that. And having this lived experience gives them something that you would otherwise be lacking without. They can really, really dig deep and do more, I would say. So the development of multiple positions which require lived experience sets process and policy to ensure sustainability of youth voice. This is digging a little bit into your generation next. Having these positions available make it so that those youth can build a sense of camaraderie, and those youth can build an entire community along with the other youth advocates, the advocates for youth, and with the supportive allies and adult supporters and things like that. It sets precedent to have people who have lived experience be doing these roles and be doing them well. And it ensures sustainability of that youth voice that you have built in, having them be a part of these processes. And with that, I will go ahead and hand it off to my presenters. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joshua. So if you're a supportive adult working in the field, you might be wondering, what do youth and young adults need through these transitions? When we're talking about establishing a possible career, pathways is just the start. We also need to establish an environment that is supportive to help young adults succeed as they're transitioning. So that's what we're going to talk about in this section, not just what they can do, but what we can do to support them in a new environment. So what do young adults need through the transition? I think the most important thing is mentoring. This is all very new. A lot of young adults who are taking this sort of pathway do not have formal experience, especially in an office or in a bureaucratic setting. So having a mentor who sort of understands and has been there makes a big difference. This is not meant to be necessarily a formal mentor. It can just be someone that they work with, someone that they relate to, someone who works in a similar organization. This can help do some coaching. Having exposure to the potential in the work, I think, is something that Joshua was really tapping into and saying that, needing to see that there's somewhere that you can grow to. This feeds into connecting to a network. You can get a lot of exposure in that way, which helps young adults continue to grow and to continue to educate themselves.
And Maddie, if I can add something here, exposure to the work, really monopolizing on and focusing in and building their skills within their role that they currently have could, in our community, our youth advocates, even though they were considered youth advocates, they were exposed to event planning, administrative stuff like reporting and creating work plans and working with stakeholders, which are all transferable skills that helps them, one, with their self-esteem, and it also helps them have skills to put on their job resumes and to put on their job applications for other sources of employment.
Absolutely. Thank you for adding that. So another really important aspect of being a young adult that's transitioning is having supportive supervision. Supervising young adults with lived experience is a little bit different. Usually the positions are brand new. Usually there's never really been a position quite like this before, and there's a little bit of extra care that goes into it. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Having opportunities to say yes is important. And I think that a lot of this comes down to trust and respect. Trust, respect, and validation are really crucial to having supportive supervision. So we talked a little bit about mentoring on the previous slide. We're going to dive into it a little more now. So like we were saying that these young adults are new to the careers. And they're also, at the same time, experiencing their own recovery and resilience journey. So it's important to remember that as a supervisor, and to remember that not all of the environments that we are working in are supportive of the youth voice, of those roles and of that work. Or if your organization is supportive of it, you may be very used to that and may not realize that there's organizations that you may partner with that don't have that same philosophy. So being aware that there's still room to make space for those youth voices. So having a relationship with the individual that you're mentoring is a really helpful way to work through leadership concepts and challenges, whether it's time management or whether it's needing support with talking about a personal issue at the office. Having someone to talk to and just say, well, that they've been there before is really helpful. And as we all know, behavioral health is hard. It's a difficult field to work in. And when we're working with young adults, they do need extra attention and care. So it's always helpful to have someone to talk to. We have a bonus resource listed for you on this slide. We have a webinar that we can go ahead and drop in the chat box for you that is going to go a little bit deeper into mentoring, specifically with supporting young adults. So things to consider when you're mentoring or when you are seeking a mentor is, what do you hope to gain from the relationship? What sort of role are you expecting this person to play? Is this something formal? Is this something informal? Is it someone that you just get coffee with every now and then? Or is it a supervisor that you're checking in with regularly on a scheduled time? So you can definitely consider having regularly scheduled meetings. Make sure that you're communicating with each other about what works for you. Are there ground rules that you'd like to establish? Things like confidentiality. What's the best way to communicate or reach each other? And then, we all have our own challenges. So being able to recognize what challenges might arise and what's the best way to address them. So some of the benefits of coaching. Before we talk about coaching, we do have a definition here for you, which is from the International Coach Federation, defining coaching as a process which helps clients improve their outlook on work and life while improving their leadership skills and unlocking their potential. So this means having a fresh perspective on personal challenges, working on those decision-making skills, interpersonal skills. All of this stuff can help lead to increased confidence. It can lead to increased productivity, increased satisfaction, and ultimately to achieving those goals. So exposure to new roles and work. And Jasmine, feel free to jump in on this if you feel so inclined. But having exposure to those new roles and having exposure to the work helps to sort of have those young adults see what it looks like for other people when they're in action. So they can work to sort of mirror this behavior or have inspiration for the future. Really just seeing those near peers as role modeling. What is it like for them to do their work? What does that look like for them, and what sort of expectations are they meant to uphold? This exposure can come from your supervisors, it can come from team members, and it can also come from entering new environments. So an example of this would be maybe attending a conference. At a research conference, it may help a youth coordinator realize the potential and evaluation within their program development. So seeing that there's different applications for the work can help you look at your own work differently.
Another example could either be a young person shadowing different meetings, things that may not necessarily directly impact their role. That could be something like just a systems meeting that talks more about the general operations of the system, or a program development meeting in a program that the young person is not exposed to. This helps pique their interest and to see what things that they may be interested in digging deeper into.
Absolutely, yes. It can help you maybe uncover passions that you didn't know existed. Or one thing that I talk to my young adults about is, they say, what do you want to do when you grow up? Or what can I do? And really, I think that in this field, there's so many jobs that you don't even realize exist yet that could be the perfect job for you. So having exposure to see those different careers that maybe it didn't even occur to that person was an option for them can help sort of highlight this new path. Okay, so supportive supervision. This is supervision that is strength-based. You use active listening skills. You're also applying those trauma-informed principles when you're working with these young adults, remembering that they are still young adults that do have lived experience, and a lot of times that does come with trauma. When you are being supported.
Sorry, Maddie. But just to go back to strength-based reflective practices, sometimes as youth or young adult leaders, we may be a little confused by that term. So I just wanted to provide a couple examples. That may be asking questions like what's positive and successful right now in supervision? What do we do to make this better? Opposed to being punitive or blaming, we're asking questions like, what can we do to make this better? What do we need to consider? That may need to be stopped? How do we do this better? And then who makes the action? And then in supervision, making sure that you're outlining consequences so everyone is on the same page with holding each other accountable. Sorry, Maddie.
No, that's great. Thank you so much for saying that. So yeah, so this is providing feedback instead of using punitive strategies, exactly like Jasmine was saying. So when you're looking back at those issues, how can we do this better? Or also maybe what's causing this to begin with. It helps to be accessible, and it also really helps to balance support, whether it's administrative support or situational support. So how can we create a nurturing environment within our organization? It helps to interview and hire nurturing supervisors. Make sure that that's something that you're looking for. It also helps to find staff that are willing to be nurtured, which is also a different way you could put that would be people who are receptive to constructive feedback. It really helps to have diverse leaders. You can do this by having organizational strategy and hiring practices, and to provide opportunities for diverse leaders to convene within your staff and in the broader network.
A couple examples of how I provided a nurturing environment or cohesion within my team in Wayne County was providing like an open door policy. Now, we know that doesn't work all the time because we have to get things done. So on 1 day a week, I would have office hours where at any time they could come in and talk to me about a little bit of anything. Another thing that I made sure that we did was, it's important to be real and to be able to relate. So being down to earth and having conversations about a little bit of everything. Sometimes young people come in and they're in crisis and they have needs that are not being met. And even though that is not necessarily concerning your work, it is something that is impacting the young people and clearly impacting them to be able to do their work. So one of the things that I was able to do was I did 15-minute rant sessions. And it sounds a little funny, but I'll allow young people to kind of come into my office, and for 15 minutes they could talk about whatever it is that they wanted to talk about on the record or off the record, as long as they knew that as long as they didn't, really disclose them wanting to hurt themselves or others, or as long as it wasn't anything harmful, it could be an off-the-record conversation. So sometimes young people would come in disclosing, what's going on at home. One young person, actually, their house burnt down, and they were living in the burnt house for a year. But it helps you really identify where the young person is in their life and, how to support them in their work.
Thanks very much, Jasmine. So we talked about connections to a network. It really helps to be able to participate and connect with a local Youth M.O.V.E. chapter if there's one around, or other youth-run organizations. Basically, to get some peer support, it really helps to be able to work with other youth who do have lived experience. It also can help to create partnerships within the work. Being able to pick the phone up and call someone can make a big deal, can make a big difference in your community, just knowing people in the right places and having that personal relationship. It's also great to have peer groups with others in your roles. So joining an affinity group, for instance, in Indiana, we have a youth workers fellowship. So that's an affinity group that I'm a part of. There's also national level organizations that you can check out. If you are part of an affinity or a peer group in your community, feel free to let us know what that is and how you like it in the chat box if that's something that's helpful for you. Having a connection to a peer or to peer groups and to a network at large makes it easy, acceptable, and safe to spend time working within your network, and can really, it prevents burnout and enhances the work that we're doing on a whole. So connecting to other emerging leaders. Youth and young adults need a variety of supports to develop their capacity as leaders. So having supportive relationships with mentors and coaches like we've talked about before really does help. So advocates for youth can play unique roles as supports and as near peers, since these people have been through similar, are emerging leaders that have been through similar experiences. They can act as near peers. So finding people to connect them to can really help keep young adults in the work and help take off some of that stress. Also, in continuing education opportunities, a lot of us are required to get continuing education credit. But this is also important for young adults to continue learning, to gain exposure. So make sure that there is a budget for professional development for these young adults in your organization. A great place to find opportunities. Please go ahead.
I'm sorry. And that's a great place to make sure that you have money in the budget to send you to different conferences. There are a lot of national conferences popping up. One, Youth M.O.V.E. National is having the conference coming up. But there's a lot of different youth conferences that really are geared to building the skills of young people, or within the national conferences, whether it's the Wraparound Conference, the Federation of Families Conference, there are workshops that are there to support young people in building their skills and developing. So it is sometimes beneficial to also have money budgeted for them to attend some of those same national conferences that a lot of other staff within your agency or organization may already be attending.
Absolutely. Thank you for adding that. And then also, it's super easy to just ask young adults what they want to learn. What areas do they feel like they could be supported, or are there things that are particularly interesting to them? And like Jasmine said, it's always awesome to send people to the Youth M.O.V.E. conference, so keep that in mind.
Yep. Another important thing to do is to standardize training specific for their role. A lot of Maddie mentioned earlier that a lot of times this is a new role. And so a lot of times as administrators, we forget that there's no training or anything specific to that role. So whether it's within your community where you're able to develop and build those trainings yourself, or really reaching out and using things like Youth M.O.V.E. National, our technical assistance and our resources on our website, or different technical assistance centers to really get trainings and different resources that are specific to young people in their roles.
Thank you for sharing that, Jasmine. It looks like we have a question in the chat box. I'm going to hand it to you, Jasmine, and the question is, are there recommended interview questions that help to identify a nurturing supervisor and the ability to be nurtured? Do you have any recommendations for us, Jasmine?
That is a good question. I don't know if there's any formally released. I know we had, what we did was we worked with our youth advocates to develop a list of questions for interviews. But I don't know if there's any published. So is this from Brittany? I'm sorry, I may not be, my screen is still frozen, so I'm not sure if I'm seeing the right person. But what I can do is definitely follow. Oh, from Katie. Okay. What I could do is definitely take that question back and see if I can find some resources for you.
Great. Thank you so much. Okay, so what can you do to support the development of these career pathways? We do have some action items listed here, so things such as building justification for growth and additional staff. This basically means helping to create those positions, securing funding for the additional positions, and developing those at varying levels of the organization. By having those different positions at different levels that require lived experience, it sort of creates that pathway for someone with lived experience to progress through the organization.
Yeah,
one of the things that
sorry, Maddie.
Go ahead.
In my community, one of the things that we did was when I started as a youth advocate in 2005. At that time, in Wayne County, we only had 4 youth advocate positions. At that moment, we began realizing that there was a greater need and we needed more young people to be involved. And so what we did was we began tracking our work. So we began doing different monthly reports. So that way we were able to compose different binders and different things to really track who we're reaching, what activities we're providing, which really helped us build the justification to add more positions. We actually, now, fast forward to 2018, we have more than 20 youth positions in Wayne County. And additionally, we also have youth support, which is a Medicaid billable service, which offers additional youth positions here within our community mental health agency.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jasmine, so much for lending us your experience as a supervisor and as one who has young adults in the organization, as someone who was a young adult and made it through that transition. So here we have some additional resources for you all. We have the Youth Advocate to Advocate for Youth PowerPoint here available for you. This is also on the Youth M.O.V.E. National website. We also have the worksheet listed here for you, again, on the website. You can find it by going to youthmovnational.org, clicking on resources, and then following the Generation Next tab. We have some additional resources here for you. This is an overview of the 7 stages. It's just a nice one-pager that sort of goes over what the 7 stages are. Does a quick breakdown. This is great for helping to work with groups of young adults. So we're going to go ahead and open the floor for questions for you all. If you would like to, you can add those questions in the chat box, and Jasmine, Joshua, and myself would be happy to field those for you. We all have different levels of experience. We work in different areas and have a wealth of knowledge. So feel free to type any questions for us in the chat box. Okay, while people are typing, I just want to let everyone know that Youth M.O.V.E. National has begun to do some office hours. Jasmine, do you want to tell us a little bit about those?
Sure. So Youth M.O.V.E. National, we're hosting 1-hour phone calls, really designed to support the community building and really here to do whatever service, whatever technical assistance you guys need at the moment. So if you're having any barriers, any issues, need any resources, would like to bounce ideas off of someone from here from National, you'll be able to do that. We have these calls on the opposite month of the Direct Connect. So since how we have Direct Connect here in December, the next youth office hours will be January 17th, 2019, and that's 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern Time. You guys have the schedule here in your slide deck. And they're also, let me see if they're also coming out in different announcements. And if you want the call-in information, please follow us on Facebook or look on our website for more information.
Those are also available in the TA Telegram. If you are not subscribed to that already, it's an amazing resource. You can go ahead and click the link there on your screen and get subscribed to that. There's lots of excellent resources that come to you, including reminders about our office hours. And that is actually Jasmine and myself. We just are going to be hanging out on the phone. We had a great response last month. We really look forward to being able to work with you all in the future. Another opportunity that we have coming up here at Youth M.O.V.E. National is Dare to Dream America. Some of you may have heard of this before. If you have not, it is Dare to Dream America is a program that offers opportunities for youth-led groups to have mental health awareness activities within their communities. So we are currently accepting grants, accepting applications for grants up to $2,500 to implement projects that bring mental health awareness to the community. So feel free to check that out at youthmovenational.org/dare-to-dream. It's a really simple application process. We like to sort of think of it as Grants 101, where we give these mini grants to groups of young adults. We help to coach them through it, guide them through it, offer coaching calls, We're available to support them 100%. And they are supported also through a series of webinars throughout the grant cycle and do some reporting at the end. So it's really simple stuff, but it can make a really big difference, and there's lots of incredible projects. If you would like to get some ideas for projects for your community, please feel free to check out our website, youthinternational.org/dare-to-dream.
And join us for the next Direct Connect. The next Direct Connect is February 27th, but we have changed the topic because we have very exciting results coming back from our youth workforce survey. And pretty much this highlights what the different roles within the youth workforce as of to date, what they may look like, some barriers or challenges that they each role experience. So it's going to be a really exciting topic. Again, Direct Connect is from 3 to 4:30 Eastern Time, and I hope to see you guys there.
Awesome. We do have one question here in the chat box, which is there an extension of the deadline for Dare to Dream? So I'll go back up to this slide. So the applications are actually due at the end of this week. I believe the date is Saturday. If there is potential that we might do an extension of the deadline, if you have more questions or if you would like support on filling out your application, please feel free, or if you have questions about what that looks like, please feel free to contact us. The contact information is here on the screen. You can also always just contact info@youthinternational.org or pretty much anyone on our website. We really are a no wrong door organization. So thank you everyone so much for joining us today. There will be a survey we would love if you all would participate in to let us know how things went today, how we could improve that. So that should pop up when you close out your window. Or if you're watching us on YouTube, it should be in the description box for you. Thanks everyone so much for joining us today. Thank you.